Hello and welcome back to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Cato. EU enlargement extending to Ukraine and other EU countries has been gaining traction for some time. But now there is a focus on ensuring that once these candidates join the EU, they don't fall into the trap of regression. Tuesday's remarks from the EU's Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas and Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos suggest that many issues remain unresolved at this stage. I now welcome Petras Auštrevičius, a Lithuanian MEP from the Renew Europe group, to tell us about the details. Hello, and thank you so much for being with us.
Very good morning to all.
So this week's summit in Brussels presented a so-called report card on Ukraine and other candidate countries on their progress or lack thereof. So tell us about Ukraine's situation to begin with.
Well, indeed, yesterday the European Commission launched a well-awaited document on enlargement. It's a kind of the annual report on progress achieved, as well as some lagging things on the side of the candidate countries. I really salute the paper. It's a rather quality-based report, very streamlined, focused on all candidate countries, meaning 10 candidate countries, Turkey included, and on specifically on Ukraine. Although Ukraine is really praised for efforts under very critical circumstances, as we know, because of Russian war of aggression, nevertheless, Ukraine is regarded as a candidate country moving forward. But indeed, still there are things to be fixed, especially on anti-corruption, democratic institutions and resilience. So that's why for Ukraine and indeed for other sectorial reforms. Speaking specifically, I don't see major criticism expressed towards Ukraine, but I hope Ukraine it will take as encouragement for further steps to be made.
And what safeguards are being proposed to prevent the regression of the rule of law in future accession treaties?
Well, in fact, this is a very good point. By the way, one candidate country, Georgia in particular, was, I would say, rightly criticized because of the backsliding in particular of democratic criteria and democracy in general. So that's why the Commission made it very clear that every year, not only by this annual enlargement report, but by many other reports, as, for example, rule of law semester, assessment of each and every country, member state, as well as candidate countries, will be kind of enough of focus to analyze things and indicate if there is any risk of backsliding on those major fundamentals.
But if we assume the candidate countries meet the necessary criteria to join in the first place, why should we be concerned about possible future regression? What has instigated this idea?
Well, we live in a very realistic world, and we know that. I mean, things can change over the sudden after election, for example, as we're already facing very complicated situation with Viktor Orban government or Fico government in Slovakia. So backslidings, change of kind of direction of governments, negligence towards major European democratic standards as well as values, increase uncertainty. And we have a situation as, for example, Hungary is continuously blocking Ukraine's accession because of some bilateral issues, so-called bilateral issues. But we see it as really a big concern coming because of those governments, more populistic governments, indeed bringing more trouble all around.
And how do monitoring mechanisms contribute to the rule of law in new member states? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, this is a very good question. Well, accession is something, it's based on promise, it's based on the accession treaty, but implementation and living according to the agreed things is very important thing. So that's why monitoring instruments must be in place. They must be conditioned by financial support. Otherwise, we might, expressing right concerns on the right time, but will be no reaction from those countries. So that's why monitoring mechanisms, as I said, semester reports, very focused one-time reports on candidate countries are important, but more importantly is to condition it to the financial support, because otherwise we might have only one-way communication.
And are this week's report cards delivering more of a political or technical message to the candidate countries? Obviously, Georgia is in the most challenging situation at the moment.
Very good point as well. What I liked in this report, it said from very beginning, because of the geostrategic situation, because of uncertainty around Europe, enlargement becomes as a kind of, a major instrument to increase Europe's political, economic, defense and security power. So that's why we should look at the enlargement as a possibility for Europe to raise up, to become more, united and more resilient. And what comes on Georgia and the rest, of course, we still see certain backdrops in this regard, and Georgia remains a big concern. That's why the report congratulates Georgian people, not the Georgian government, for any kind of view on enlargement.
And to what extent has the current geopolitical situation broadly in Europe, obviously, especially the war in Ukraine and the tensions in the Western Balkans, have they accelerated the real decisions on EU enlargement? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it brings one major additional and important aspect. That's geostrategic aspect. We should be very serious making all the decisions towards enlargement, because it's not technicality. It's not just one or two sectorial reforms. We have to look at the increasing, uncertainty around our borders. So that's why the better prepared candidate countries join the European Union, I think the stronger we are together. So that's why unity, geostrategic dimension really dominates this report. That's why there is quite a focus on common foreign and security policy affiliation kind of aspect from candidate countries towards EU.
And of all the candidate countries presented yesterday, who is closest to actually making it as an EU member? Who's done the best?
Well, naturally, I mean, for those who started their way towards European Union earlier, they have a better position. In particular, Montenegro, just to remind you, given the candidate status in 2010, negotiations won 2012. So, I mean, they are, in fact, a good decade ahead of Moldova and Ukraine. So that's why, indeed, Montenegro and Albania are considered to be more advanced towards their future memberships.
And I just wanted to ask a little bit about the environmental issues, the climate issues in the EU, because we know that after dozens of hours of negotiations, the EU environment ministers have failed to reach an agreement regarding the 2040 climate target. We know that Poland is obviously challenging some of the decisions. Do you think that a breakthrough could still be achieved after discussions resume on Wednesday morning?
I'm hopeful. I believe the decision will be a kind of a compromise. Probably we have to reflect towards, uneasy economic situation, increased global competitiveness, and to adjust our green policy lines, but not to abandon it. We know because of this. I mean, it's because of the better living of people and cleaner environment. But the decision is needed to move forward, because industries are eagerly awaiting for that decision.
And what do you think are the main challenges that EU member states face in order to achieve that agreement? Do you think that the overall sort of increase of Euroscepticism plays a role in this? What is your sense? Obviously, as an MEP, you're much more exposed to these discussions.
Well, obviously, I mean, we put rather high and demanding standards towards green transition. Industries need investments. Industries need adaptivity. I mean, a new kind of level of adaptivity. And as I said before, the global competitiveness are on increase. I mean, China largely neglecting green transition. I mean, they still use outdated technologies and overtake Western economies. So that's why we have to be, as I said, realistic as well as complying with the increased standards, but probably in a more adaptive way.
Okay, Petras Auštrevičius, Lithuanian MEP from Renew Europe Group. A pleasure speaking to you. Thanks so much.
Likewise.
And that's all for World Talks today. Thank you so much for being with us, and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.